When they announced that 6 Dr. Seuss books would be taken out of publication, my response was fairly tepid and lightly critical. Look, you can still buy the books, right? They're not gonna print them anymore, but there's tons of these books everywhere. They're probably digitized already. You can still get them. They're not going out and actively burning these books or say banning people from even buying them, right? Now they are. eBay is actually taking down listings for Dr. Seuss books that are not offensive. Now, there are certainly some images in some books that some people could probably be offended by. And the Washington Post asks Fox News a very simple question. If you think these books are appropriate, why won't you show the images on TV? It's actually a fair question. But I believe one of these books is actually just talking about why you shouldn't be racist. Why you should not judge people based on how they look. These are being removed. It's one thing to say we will no longer publish a book. Sure, but they're still publishing Mein Kampf and books from Louis Farrakhan, and you can still buy those as well. And I think I know why that is the case. I think it's because those individuals, as abhorrent as they are and as how villainous they are, they still advocate for racial identitarianism, which the left supports wholeheartedly. And that's the big picture with all the Dr. Seuss stuff. Now, let's be real. The left is treating the Dr. Seuss thing like it's just totally dumb, and Republicans are overreacting over this. I kind of agree. Kind of, though. I definitely think it's strange to see so many conservative outlets screaming about the Dr. Seuss books. But now that we're seeing eBay actually remove listings because it's offensive content, well, for me, that's the line. Perhaps for conservatives, the line was a bit further back. For me, I think we're crossing the line. It's not just about Dr. Seuss, however. It is a wave of censorship across the internet. The purge is real. A documentary on Justice Clarence Thomas has been removed from Amazon. Why? He's a Supreme Court justice. He's currently sitting right now. Gone. Now that's creepy. Right Side Broadcasting Network had their Trump speech removed from YouTube. One journalist has been suspended for simply uploading raw footage. My friends, the censorship is real, and it is worse than we have ever seen. And you want to criticize the overreaction towards Dr. Seuss, fine, but eBay taking down the private selling of these books, insane. Absolutely insane. I predict it will only get worse. Some of these books from Dr. Seuss were being sold for upwards of $20,000. People were making a killing off of saying, okay, if you want the banned book. Before, I didn't call it a banned book. I said they're just not publishing it anymore. And there's a lot of things we don't publish anymore. But I'll say it again. You can still buy Mein Kampf and books from people like Farrakhan and other psychotic, villainous individuals. Their books are all readily available. One funny thing that happened a long time ago was when Jordan Peterson's book came out, 12 Rules for Life. There was one bookstore, I believe it was in New Zealand, it may have been Australia, where they banned the selling of Jordan Peterson's self-help book, but you could still buy Mein Kampf. Why? It's a good question. Let's read the story and see what's going on. Before we do, this time, I absolutely mean it. Go to timcast.com and become a member. You'll get access to exclusive members-only content from the Timcast IRL podcast. We have full podcast episodes talking with people like James O'Keefe and Sidney Watson. I'm not kidding when I say the purge is real. It is very reasonable to suspect it is only a matter of time before my channel gets nuked. You know why? Because I am challenging the narrative. I'm not screaming about they're coming after Dr. Seuss in the same way as Fox News. I'm talking about, in general, the bigger picture that's happening. And I've had a lot of people ask me, they understand why certain conservative channels are allowed to exist. They toe that conservative Inc. narrative, the counter narrative. It's very obvious. But what I do, they say, a disaffected liberal trying to speak to moderate individuals, that's more dangerous for the left than just being conservative. Conservatives are the easy villain. They can say, see, that's why the villain is bad. But what about someone like Tim Pool, who talks about the social justice narrative of shows like Static Shock being a good thing, but now they're going in the wrong direction? Someone who says all of these great civil rights, triumphs are good and should be maintained. There's a difference between me and, say, a run-of-the-mill conservative. So I think there is a very real risk that they will ban my channel at some point. And I get people saying, no, Tim, you're not going to get purged. You're overreacting. And I'm like, dude, my Facebook page was already shut down. They'll still allow me to post because they can't ban me because I didn't say anything that broke their rules. But they stripped the ability of my page to do anything. Effectively shadow banned out of the monetization program. It could happen. And we are fully preparing for this. That's why I've set up timcast.com. But hey, we're not just saying give money. We have people who work for a company. We're planning on doing more. I know this is a long plug for timcast.com, but it's part of the bigger theme that's happening with the censorship. Again, let's talk about how not publishing some Dr. Seuss books is not the craziest thing in the world. When they announced that out of, I think, 61, there would be 6 that would not be reprinted. Listen, I hear that and I say, are there images in there where we've decided they're not good depictions? There was one guy who has this Twitter thread. He's a black man. He writes for The Root. And he said, you need only, here's what he said. When he as a child opened up that Dr. Seuss book, the only depiction of a black person he saw was a caricature, of a racist caricature. And that means something very different to him. I get that. I absolutely do. I think representation is extremely important when you have people of all different backgrounds. I know firsthand. But this idea that private sellers can't trade this now, that's where things get absolutely crazy. That's why when they said we're not going to publish this, I was like, the books are still there, buy them. There are a lot of things that are considered inappropriate that people own because they're collectible. The stop banning the private sale, that's where it's really crazy. Not that long ago, there's a card game called Magic the Gathering. You may be familiar with it, maybe not, but don't worry, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of a card game. This card is it's fantasy. It's almost like Dungeons and Dragons. The company that owns it banned art and certain cards because they deemed them racist. Now, the cards weren't racist. It makes no sense. There maybe was one card where people were like, I don't know, that looks kind of suspect. The craziest thing about it, though, was that private companies refused to sell them secondhand. It's a collectible card game. It's like a baseball card. And then you're like, well, I understand the company that makes the cards won't sell them anymore. But then you go to like a pawn shop and the guy's like, no, we're not selling that. That's where it gets weird. You should still be able to buy the stuff, right? If you want it. Not because you support the imagery, but because of what it means for history. This is creepy. You can't make this stuff up. Outrage as eBay removes listings for canceled Dr. Seuss books because they glorify violence, but allows copies of Mein Kampf and Louis Farrakhan's books to be sold from the Daily Mail. They say eBay on Thursday started removing listings for the 6 Dr. Seuss books that are no longer going to be produced. They emailed people who had listed the books saying that the post violated their offensive materials policy. The company has not released any kind of statement about it, nor have they responded to inquiries. Now that they are being accused of censorship, virtue signaling, and big tech book burning by angry internet users who are demanding to know why they can't sell items they own, just because Silicon Valley no longer thinks they're appropriate. Dr. Seuss Enterprises announced 2 days ago that it would no longer reprint 6 books which contained racist imagery. The books are, quote, And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, McElligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer. It came after a school district removed them from its curriculum. President Joe Biden snubbed Dr. Seuss in his remarks about Read Across America Day in a certified sign that they had been canceled. People then started buying up the suddenly limited edition books on Amazon and other sites. Some then posted them on eBay for exorbitant prices to turn a profit and cash in on the row. One person who had their listing taken down bought a copy of, quote, And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street on Amazon for $33. He then attracted bids on eBay for $100. The seller, who went by the name Chad, posted on Twitter when eBay emailed him to tell him they'd removed the post. This listing was removed. Offensive policy. They said, Hello, Chizad 1982. We had to remove your listing because it didn't follow our offensive material policy. Listings that promote or glorify hatred, violence, or discrimination and aren't allowed. What activity didn't follow the policy? Dr. Seuss Enterprises has stopped publication of this book due to its negative portrayal of some ethnicities. As a courtesy, we have ended your item and refunded your selling fees. And as long as you do not relist the item, there will be no negative impact to your account. Please review our offensive materials policy. Prohibits this item for more information. Here's another one. They say, hello, CL, the username. It's just a bunch of numbers. We had to remove your listing because it violated our offensive materials policy. Then go on to say the exact same thing. One person tweeted, you can't make this up. eBay is blocking my listing for Dr. Seuss's The Cat's Quizzer as citing it as offensive material, yet anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan's books are okay. You can also buy Mein Kampf on eBay for exorbitant prices. Yeah, well, people basically went off saying, wow, it's insane. How is this happening? Some of these books are being listed on Amazon for hundreds of dollars. Check this out from the Washington Examiner. Soon to disappear, Dr. Seuss books now selling for as high as $20,000 on eBay. From the Washington Examiner, they say, in light of newfound censorship of the children's author, some are flocking to eBay, and many purchasers are willing to dole out thousands of dollars to get their hands on what may be the last copies of some of Dr. Seuss's famous books. $20,000 is crazy. What do you think the response from the left has been? Well, over on Twitter, Matthew Gertz tweets, I count 85 mentions of Seuss on Fox News today as of 4 p.m. This was from March 2nd, via closed caption. They've covered his purported cancellation every hour since 4 a.m., saying his name an average of 7 times an hour. He says, I've now got 139 mentions of, I've got 139 mentions of Seuss on Fox News between 4 a.m. yesterday and midnight. The author's purported cancellation was mentioned on all but 3 hours of the network's programming. He goes on to say, the coverage stressed across both news and opinion. Here's Brett Baer, theoretically Fox's top newsman, introducing one such segment with the cancel culture going after Dr. Seuss. He goes on to say, here's Tucker Carlson claiming that the people in charge are canceling Seuss to eliminate a very specific kind of mid-century American culture, a culture that championed meritocracy and colorblindness and the superiority of individual achievement. And perhaps Tucker Carlson is a little bombastic in saying that. I'll just say this. Whatever the reason, the purge is real. And I will stress before moving on, my friends, it is not about them saying they won't publish Dr. Seuss books. There are many books that are no longer published. Usually what we see with like Looney Tunes and Mickey Mouse, they say, well, this was from a different time when this was made, and we now deem it to be offensive, but for the sake of preserving history, we're going to show it. I believe there are some Looney Tunes cartoons where they say, when this was made, this was considered socially okay. They say to remove this content would be to deny this history, which is not okay. I agree. That is the appropriate response. I do think it's silly, however, that, Disney came out and said the Muppets were racist now. Okay, geez, calm down. The Bugs Bunny thing where he was doing like offensive caricatures, I get why we don't want to republish that today. But if you want to seek it out to watch it, to get rid of it would be akin to denying it happened. And we want people to understand why and why it's offensive to us today. Look, it's not cut and dry. I do think it's fair to cancel some things. I am not staunchly on the right saying don't ban anything. No, I think there comes a time when we look back and say, maybe that was like not okay. You know what I mean? There are certain things we don't say anymore. There are certain jokes we don't make anymore. And it's because we respect each other. But there's a difference. You can still buy this art. I went down. Where was I? I was in Florida, I think. And I went to a bed and breakfast. Well, no, it wasn't really a bed and breakfast. It was kind of a bed and breakfast. It looked like one, like it had the bedrooms, but you couldn't actually stay there. They had all of these really old racist advertisements everywhere. Some of the most racist, imagery you could imagine. But there were people of all races eating there. They weren't showing this art to glorify it. They were just showing that this art existed. It was to ban art would be insane, in my opinion. And if someone took offense to the art, you'd simply say, we're not showing it to you because we like it. It's just a relic of that time. And we need to understand it. And there were like plaques with like writing explaining what the art was and why it was made. And it was trying to give people a glimpse of what things used to be like. I think that's very important. But now they're getting rid of statues. They're getting rid of books. They're getting rid of culture. And they're trying to suppress your ability to learn what's going on in the world. Before we move into all the news stuff, let me show you this from Newsbusters. Big tech platforms allow Farrakhan to spread vaccine conspiracies. I mean, that's the gist of the story. Why? This guy has been banned before. I don't think he should be banned. He should not. He should be allowed to say what he wants to say in the public space. But it's interesting that his books are allowed. His videos are allowed. Not Dr. Seuss. Not Right Side Broadcasting Network. Take a look at this. Ford Fisher, a journalist. Absolutely unbelievable, he tweets. Team YouTube has now deleted 3 raw videos and suspended my account for raw footage I took on the day of Biden's inauguration of religious extremist protesters being confronted by both leftist and pro-Trump activists. We will fight back. I wonder, what about this video got it removed? Could it be that Trump supporters were pushing back on the extremists as well as the leftists? I'd like you to imagine this right now. Why what Ford is saying is so alarming and why you need to pay attention to this. Covington. What would happen if those that, myself, for instance, who showed the footage from the Covington Catholic incident in D.C., what if YouTube deleted that video? And the only narrative you got was from Washington Post, CNN, New York Times, where they claimed this bigoted Trump supporter got in the face of this poor Native American veteran man. It was a lie, by the way. What if they took down my footage? Not my footage, but my video, talking about it and showing the footage. That's what they're doing right now with Ford Fisher. He says, this is a backup of the 8-minute video Team YouTube suspended me for. The only reference is one guy who yelled that I'm not going to read what he says because of the risk. He yelled something about election fraud. The second video Team YouTube erroneously took down was a speech I filmed at the December Million MAGA March. This documentary footage was licensed by the BBC, had a story about it in Rolling Stone, and was used in the impeachment hearing itself. The third video they removed was documentary video of an anti-lockdown rally filmed by Marani Ray. Want to see this footage still? No worries. The copy I licensed Now This News is still very much online. The obvious difference is who posted it. He says the folks at Team YouTube sent this email to go with 3 takedowns and account suspension. They banned misleading content that alleges widespread fraud. My content isn't misleading, nor does it allege. It just shows what happened. The strike was possibly based on a pre-strike permanent warning I got simply for live streaming the Capitol from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on January 6th. The message is loud and clear. If you are an independent journalist or producer, they will remove you. Do you understand what's happening? They are trying to homogenize American political discourse. They don't want you, a regular person, be able to have a voice. They long for the era of Walter Cronkite, when there were only a few networks and a few anchors who could all tell you the exact same thing and you would believe it. The cathedral, the broadcast tower, the ivory tower. But with the advent of the internet, we now have a voice. And there are certain people they do not want to be able to speak, which is why I firmly believe it is only a matter of time before they nuke my channels as well. Maybe they'll even try and get rid of my own private website, but that's why we're building it, timcast.com. Look at this. I'm just some guy. I don't work for any of these networks. I've had companies try to sign me before. I worked for a Disney company. I left. I went independent. The independent voice is the threat to them. They can't allow it. Take a look at this. Right Side Broadcasting Network tweeted, they say new RSBN has been suspended from YouTube for 2 weeks because of the Trump CPAC speech, which violated their guidelines on election misinformation. The video is approaching 4 million views. They have also removed it from their platform. You can criticize Donald Trump. You can criticize what he has said. But for a news outlet to be unable to broadcast a speech from a former president, insane. It's absolutely insane. I mentioned this. I tweeted about this. I said, it's kind of strange how social media banned a press conference from doctors talking about certain medications, yet they promote a computer software businessman giving medical advice. If there was a consistency to this, I might say I could find the logic to it or understand it. But Bill Gates is not a doctor, yet he's allowed to say all of this stuff. And they say, oh, well, it's because he's following mainstream science. What? No, he isn't. He's giving his opinion on things. He's not citing studies. But there's a mainstream narrative. Certain things are allowed. The censorship is getting bad. Worse than I have ever seen. I'll stress one more time just to wrap up the Dr. Seuss stuff. It's not the ceasing of the publication. It's the limiting private sellers. It's taking down Ford Fisher's just raw footage of newsworthy events. Can't have that. Sorry. You got to sell to an agency. Don't put that on YouTube. It's right side broadcasting showing a speech from a president and not commenting at all, saying, nope, you have to. What they want you to do is they want you to put a disclaimer flashing on the screen. It's not true. Trump's lying or something like that. Shouldn't people be allowed to just hear what President Trump has to say? I guess we're supposed to call him still president because he retains the title, I suppose. No. Joe Biden is the president. There's not going to be some grand, inauguration for a new republic or anything like that. All these weird theories aren't happening. That's fair and fine to say. But shouldn't people be allowed to have a conversation about it to explain to people why this stuff is happening? Here's one of the scariest things I've seen yet. Amazon polls Justice Clarence Thomas documentary as censorship of conservative content continues. There's no excuse, my friends. It's worse than it has ever been. It is worse. It is worse every single day, in every single way. We knew that when Joe Biden got elected, this is what was going to happen. And there are a lot of people who just don't care. They're willing to sell out our right to know our own history. And I'm talking just about Clarence Thomas. It's a documentary on a guy who's currently sitting in the Supreme Court justice. Those who forget their past are doomed to repeat it. I wonder if that's the point. So let me mention. Why are they banning Dr. Seuss books from being sold? Well, I understand ceasing publication. You don't want to print caricatures of certain racial minorities. But shouldn't people still be allowed to see those things to understand why they're offensive? When you get rid of those images, people will forget. Or young people will grow up not seeing them and not understanding we don't want these things. They then allow you to buy books from really offensive and racist individuals. People like Farrakhan, for instance. Why? He's a racial identitarian. They want racial identitarianism. Recently, I did a segment about the Sacramento Unified School District where they were actually calling for white racial awakening. So what does that mean? They have to get rid of the things that would say no. How long until they try and cancel Dr. King? Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech. I long for he longed for a future where his children would be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But that flies in the face of racial identitarianism and racial affinity groups. I'm sorry, I think the outcome of all of this will be white supremacists, white supremacy. I genuinely believe that's what they're doing. They'll tell you, no, it's actually about ending racism, but it's not true. They're calling for more discrimination. They're calling for more authoritarianism. They're erasing the past. Think about this for a second. Abraham Lincoln, canceled. There's a statue of him in Boston where it's a freed slave rising with Abraham Lincoln right there beside him. It was removed. They said it was racist. Interesting. My understanding is that I heard someone say this. I don't know if it's true, that Frederick Douglass, an amazing man, abolitionist, said he hoped one day the statue would be updated with a freed slave standing proudly beside Abraham Lincoln. They determined that this statue, which was paid for by the descendants, I believe, of former slaves, and I believe some former slaves themselves, it was paid for or advocated for by them. They said it was racist to show this. To show someone breaking their shackles and rising above alongside the man who ended slavery. They removed that statue. People will forget. I wonder what the true goal is when they tell white people to have a white racial awakening about their shared history. It's crazy. I saw this tweet from Robbie Suave. He said, DC has become the most paranoid city on earth. People walk outside wearing 2 layers of masks while thousands of armed troops and barbed wire fences guard against a non-existent threat. You wouldn't want these people in charge of anything, yet they run the whole country. I asked, which dystopian novel is this? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Maybe a little bit of both. I'm sorry, not both, but all of them. We do the Timcast IRL podcast with our recurring friend, Luke Rudkowski, currently on vacation. One of his shirts is a Venn diagram showing all of the different dystopian novels. And then right in the middle, you are here. Because it's it. We got a little bit of Brave New World. We got some book burning, Fahrenheit 451. We got some 1984. We got some Atlas Shrugged. People fleeing. It's amazing. It's almost like all of these different writers could see the problems lying before us. And it wasn't any one extreme. It was a little bit of all of them coming to be. Now we can take a look at what Joe Biden is doing, the Democrats' reactions to him, the things he's calling for. He's pushing for critical race theory. These ideas will only get worse. I like this article. The Washington Post says the one simple tell that reveals Fox News' Seuss obsession for what it is. If the images at issue are so innocuous, why not show them? Washington Post, will you update now that eBay is banning the books and say, okay, maybe that goes a little too far? I don't think so. I think it's because they're all for it. It really feels like there has been a civil war and that we lost. By we, I don't mean conservatives. I'm not a conservative. I'm fairly liberal and fairly left on many issues, particularly social justice, agreeing with the ceasing of publication of certain books that are racist or offensive. But we as in those who understand the importance of individualism and freedom. And that's what Tucker Carl was saying, and he got criticized for it. Tucker was talking about how they seek to get rid of this era of individualism and meritocracy to push the collective. And maybe that's the real issue here. As they try to create a monoculture, they must get rid of anything that lies outside of the establishment narrative. I got to be honest. I'm actually fairly optimistic in all of this. Now, don't get me wrong. These things are all really bad and they're getting worse. And meritocracy is important. The left will tell you meritocracy is not a real thing. That's not true. They're lying. They just don't want you to they don't want you to realize your true power, that you can fight, that you can train, that you can struggle, that you can figure it out and succeed, that you can be the great inventor, the great author, the abolitionist. You can be that activist where people build a statue in your honor. You can be a great general or a president. They don't want you to realize that. Then you take a look at the lockdown and everything that's coming around us is you won't own anything and you will be happy. Sound familiar? The Great Reset. If they don't want you to succeed, if they want to tell you meritocracy is a myth, if they want to get rid of any art or conversation around the idea that you can be a strong individual, then they want to transfer more wealth to the upper class than we've ever seen in history. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy, man. It can just be the way the dominoes are falling. Some people will call it a conspiracy, but I won't go there. I think it's stupid. I think conspiracies are dumb. I'll just put it this way. For whatever reason that we have the lockdowns, COVID, fine. It's resulting in the largest transfer of wealth from the working class to the elites. The laws in place around traveling. You need $2,000 if you would like to travel because you got to buy that hotel. Guess who can still travel easily? Rich people. Guess who can't? Poor people. When they destroy businesses, what's left? Poor people are out of work, desperate and struggling, and they ask the government for help. They take away books that preach individuality, and what will we be left with? Tucker doesn't need to go as far as to say it's intentional. We can just see what will come of this if we simply do the arithmetic. A world in which there is an elite class, party members, as it were, perhaps, and the proletariat, I suppose. Is that really it? The bourgeoisie and the proletariat? This divide is getting worse, and the bridge to class elevation is being destroyed, but perhaps on purpose. The elites will stay rich, and the poor people will lose all abilities to sustain themselves. They will tell you to sacrifice everything in the name of saving the planet, but then they will buy beachfront property and fly on private jets. The idea of government for, by, and of the people has been destroyed. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit here and say it is happening. I think it did happen. And we're watching it with Joe Biden. But I'm optimistic. I said that. You know why? For all the things they're doing, I think, for one, they're going crazy with it. But I also think it shows how desperate they've become. I think it was Michael Malice who said, if they were winning, the propaganda would not be necessary. Yeah. Interesting. They could only ban so many people so quickly. They're ramping up the censorship, but it's causing a massive backlash. And they can't ban everyone without creating a massive Streisand effect. In which case, maybe it's not all bad. And though we're watching the dominoes fall and it seems like it's going to get really bad, the night is always darkest before the dawn. And maybe, though we see the dystopian nightmare in front of us, behind it, it may lead to freedom. I don't know for sure. All I know is that if we do not remain focused, if we stop fighting this censorship, then we do lose. So we have to keep pushing back, talking about what matters, and rejecting this notion, this censorship. We must build culture. We must make our own movies, our own comics, and say no to this machine. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. It is a live show. We will take your live questions and comments. Check it out, and we will see you all then at 8 p.m.